It is fiduciary failure to be so busy as to not have time to bring the most precious gift that a CEO can bring, which is their sense of perspective, analysis, insight, understanding. All these things require a little bit of space.
Hey, welcome to a podcast where dreams meet determination and success is just around the corner. I'm your host, Suzanne Taylor-King, and I'm here to help you unlock the full potential of your business and your life. Welcome to Unlock Your Way with STK. Let's unlock your path to success together. Good morning, everyone. Suzanne Taylor-King here for another Friday live episode of Unlock Your Way with STK. And we are here today with an incredible new connection I found and got introduced to, Eric Kaufmann. He is the managing partner of Sigatica. Awesome. Executive guide, girl dad, and incredible knowledge base on conscious leadership. And you just have this amazing story. I knew I had to bring you onto the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm delighted to be here. I'm confident no one's ever introduced me as a girl dad, but I love it. So thank you.
No, you're so welcome. I think it's so much more fun than saying father of two girls, right? Because a girl dad is just a different breed in my book. Obviously I had one too. And I think it's really incredible to describe you that way.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I have these amazing young women that are my daughters. So the girl dad is a cool ride. You know, just quick aside, it was definitely like a spiritual evolution, right? To be a girl dad. I mean, there's something about, I grew up with three brothers, right? I grew up with a military father and three brothers. And so to have two daughters and to really, allow that to inform me about this dimension of life that I didn't really have a lot of peek into as a, the oldest of four boys in a rough and tumble space. It's been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love, I immediately see the tie-in to how you balance the masculine and the feminine and the conscious leadership connection of that awareness. But before we get into conscious leadership and all that goodness, I want to hear a little bit about your story and how you came to this executive guide position that you're in.
Sure. Let's see. Yeah. So we already know, right? I was born the oldest of four boys. My dad was, had been in active military. My parents are amazing. My mom and dad are great. And as a young person, I couldn't wait to get the hell out of the house. So not a knock on them, but I had this overactive sense of autonomy. And I was like, I got to get out of there. And so I left, as soon as I graduated high school, I was gone. Right. And, I got to San Diego State back in the mid 80s to go to university. And as an unleashed youth with no direction and no container, 1980s at San Diego State was a remarkable time. But I'd say that I learned so much and none of it applied to my grades. And so, while I was getting a lot of street cred, I wasn't getting any grades. And so I ended up getting kicked out of college, whopping. Yeah, I know. Right. This is not going to go anywhere public, right? So nobody's going to hear it.
Oh, no, nobody's going to hear this. Don't worry about it. It stays just between you and I.
My daughters so I'm 19 years old and I'm kind of messed up, and I'm kicked out of college and I had to sort of pause and say, okay, what is wrong with this picture? And it's a very sobering experience at 19 to suddenly have the rug pulled out from under and go, wake up, dude, you're going the wrong way. And so long story short, I started looking around for what does it take for a human being to get a hold of their lives, to get a grip, to get a grip. And I ended up doing a bunch of, experiential research of what's around and found this spiritual community that was teaching Zen, and it looked like a bunch of people who really had their shit together, Turns out that's not true, because every human being is a mess.
Everybody's working on getting
We're all continuously trying to figure it out. But anyway, that kind of set it up for me to start being more disciplined, more intentional, more aware, more plugged in. And I ended up, being very involved in this community for 13 years. I went back to school. I graduated college. I went to work. I worked at 3M. I worked at Corning. I worked at some of these big, American institutions. And about 11, 12 years into that journey, I had this crisis moment, because now I'm sort of, 10 years out of school and really getting promoted at Corning Labs. And I'm in the spiritual community and really getting deeper and deeper into the life of kind of spiritual connection. And I was in sort of 31 or so, and I had this crisis moment saying, which way do I go?
Yeah.
There was a point where we have to focus more. And so would I focus my life really on this corporate journey that I'm on, or would I focus my life on the spiritual journey that I'm on? And after some real deliberation, I decided to go for the spiritual path and abandon the corporate path.
Wow.
And so at all of sort of 31 years old, I quit my job, gave away all my money. I shaved my hair. I, burnt my childhood photos. I took total oaths of like, I'm going in, all in. And I went off to New Mexico, where my community has some property, spent 3 months building a cabin in the woods, and then spent a year there in a silent retreat. And the intent was that was going to be like, the entree into the deeper and deeper into the spiritual realm, because I'm in, right? I got no material stuff. I'm now here in silence. But I'm getting to the point of how do I get to be the executive guide, right? So a year into the silent retreat, I have this revelation that says, dude, you're going the wrong way. It might not have said dude, but that's how it sounded in my head, right? Mm-hmm. You're going the wrong way. Your spiritual growth is not in seclusion, but with wife and children and service and community.
Wow.
It was a total wow, Suzanne, because I was like done with all that. Mm-hmm. And now I'm download saying, you're going the wrong way. You got to go back. And then so that was hard to stomach,
I'm sure after being that, that's a big commitment to, just spend that long of a time in silence, but you made the commitment by doing all of that work to go into that.
You're so right. It was a huge commitment, it was identity. It wasn't just a commitment, right? It was an identity. I was like, this is who I am. I am now this recluse. I am going to live my life as a spiritual, seeker, and not in the material world. But that was cut short by this download. And so I turned around, went to San Diego, and thought, well, what the heck am I going to do? I don't want to go back and get a job, right? Mm-hmm. I want to be in this role where I can bridge these two worlds. How do I bring this deep world of spiritual aspiration and practice and this remarkable world of material accomplishment and specifically, leadership? And that was the birth of it, and that was 27 years ago. And so it's been, that was kind of that was the origin of it, right? How to blend these two worlds. And then over the past 26, 7 years, figuring out how to do that and the practical way has been sort of the great journey and the great gift of my experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm really curious about when you say download, when you say, you were in silence for a long time. And it's funny that you say dude, because When I get a really good message, it's typically like a tap on the shoulder. Excuse me. Was it like that for you? Was it just like an internal knowing that you were going the wrong way?
That's a really fine point of a question. I like it. I didn't hear a voice outside my head, right? And so you know, it was more than a felt sense. It was, I mean, I remember it as like a knowing, right? Not a voice, but a sudden knowing. And
Yeah.
knowing felt like it was a third party knowing, as in like, I'm not thinking
Yeah.
of this entirely, you know, it's not like, oh, let me sit down and figure out this formula kind of knowing. It was like this knowing that came upon me. So that's why it has a sense of third party and it has a sense of external input. And yeah, you know, you're right to sort of pull the string. The words are, is it a download? Is it an insight? Is it a revelation? Is it a message? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because it was different for everyone. You know, I think when this happens, this distinction of, you know, did you hear it? Did you see it? Did you feel it? Was it internal? Was it external? Was it through writing? Was it through thinking? And I often say for myself, it's like I just remembered it. Like somebody told me 10 years ago this thing, and I, in the moment, say, oh, and I remember what I'm supposed to be doing or thinking or being. And I got that sense with you that it was like a really strong call to be bringing this spiritual knowledge to other people.
Yeah, I really like that you use the word call because that's how I often refer to it as a calling. And I'll say that I'm 39 years now into a meditation practice. It's very consistent, right? I still sit every day, still do retreats twice a year, right? It never abated. It just changed as my life changed, right? Mm-hmm. But I definitely refer to these elements as a calling. And when I really reflect on what meditation has become for me at this point in life, it's become a practice of deep listening, right? And listen at different levels, but in a way, like when I'm sitting on the cushion, it's almost like my head is tilted and I'm attuning to what am I being called to? And quite frankly, you know, in leadership and in life, it's such a big part of what I am teaching and coaching and helping other folks, other leaders in particular, attune to, because we are so remarkably smart, right? There's such an incredible cognitive capacity. And especially the folks that you and I get this sort of privilege to work with are really, for the most part, smart, really accomplished, sharp thinkers. And we tend to over-index our ability to think cognitively in linear ways and undervalue this kind of sense of spontaneity, of surprise, of illumination, of inspiration, of mystery. And I think one of the things that great sort of thinkers are actually known for is not just thinking cognitively, but having the spaciousness to allow that inspiration to arise and inform them and guide them, right? And in every spiritual tradition, every religious tradition, we talk about being guided, right? But it doesn't have to be a divine being. It's the subtleness. It's the quiet. It's the remembering. I love the way you said that, right? There's a remembering that arises when we can get, you know, present enough, and when we can get, you know, curious enough, make space for that much subtler sound to arise. And often that is what shapes our lives. That is what, you know, Edison was hunting in his laboratory when he spent 2,000 efforts trying to make the bulb, right? That's what Ford was hunting when he was trying to figure out the conveyor belt, right? These inventors are not just there cranking smoke coming out of their ears. They're making space. It's Archimedes in a bathtub, leaning back, relaxing, and having the eureka moment. Yeah. And I think that's so critical and so undervalued that we really need to bring that forth to have a more meaningful life.
That's so good. So good, because the way you describe it is so different than the way I describe it, but it's so the same. This idea of creating space, I love the way you say that. I say block the calendar, block the calendar and honor that time for yourself. Whether it's an hour a day or 2 hours a day, I like 3 hours a day. But whatever that looks like for you, you have to intentionally create that space, or your day just gets filled with tasks and calendar appointments and clients and then the family responsibilities. And the idea of having space and time to allow thinking to happen, at least for me, has been key to everything great I've ever created, including my family and my son and my business. And I'd love to understand why this idea of giving time to yourself is so difficult for so many people.
There are probably more than one reason why it is. But the first thing that sort of arises is that we are performance-based. Right? So if you think of what you do from what we're exposed to from being a very little person all the way through, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, job, right? Performance reviews, right, are regular things in the job. When they talk about talent reviews, we look at potential and performance, right? How are we doing? And so we are performance-based, which means action-oriented, right? And it takes sort of a special teaching for somebody to realize that performance and reflection are not at odds, right? That space for the emergent to come forward does not diminish our ability to get shit done, right? And I think we're in such a activity mode, and then not only is performance based, but we talked about the identity I had going into this sort of leaving corporate and being a spiritual person. When that suddenly changed, right? It wasn't just a function of doing something different. I had a new identity that was coming online, and I had to grapple with not being the person I already decided I was and now being somebody different, right? And so we are rewarded for our performance. Our identity is rooted in doing stuff. And, the more you have on the calendar, the more important you are by some accounts, right? And so there's a tremendous pressure around us to do, and there's very little encouragement around us to listen. And to listen to other people is amazing. To listen to ourselves seems like just a ridiculous luxury.
But isn't that where growth comes from the reflection on, let's take a mistake, for example, or a failure. When you reflect on that moment in time and your reaction to that moment in time, isn't that where the learning comes from? Isn't that where the gifts come from for the future?
I'm smiling because I love that you say that. I just love that you say that. I mean, yes. And I think I've written about this in all three of my books, right? This notion that we learn from our mistakes is really aspirational, because I've made the same mistake more than once, and I've seen other people make mistakes multiple times. No, we can learn from mistakes, right?
Yeah.
We pause and digest the mistake and make sense of it. And so it's so important what you're saying, right? We don't learn from the mistakes. We learn from the reflection if we pause and say, what happened? What were the sort of causes for it? What can I do differently? What do I have to set up differently? Who do I need to be differently? What do I need to sketch? Yes, it's the reflection that is the learning, not the mistake.
Right.
And from a leadership perspective, from a life leadership perspective, but certainly organizational team, most of my clients are CEOs and C-suite executives.
Mm-hmm.
It is fiduciary failure to not reflect.
Yes.
It is fiduciary failure to be so busy as to not have time to bring the most precious gift that a CEO can bring, right? Which is their sense of perspective, analysis, insight, understanding, integration. All these things require, a little bit of space. So yeah. Let's do more of that.
Well, I think, that this gift of knowing yourself at a really deep level as a leader, I know that as I've learned myself, I'm able to help others in a bigger way or a deeper way. If I thought about being the coach I am today when I was 24 running my first business, not even possible. Not even, I couldn't even think of who I am today because all the things hadn't happened to me yet, right? And I think finding gifts in tragedy and trauma and illness and all the things, all the mistakes, what's that thread that goes through life as a leader? Or it doesn't matter if you're a coach, but if you're owning a business, if you're in the world, if you're a parent, I don't care if you're a CEO, it doesn't matter what position you're in, because this work applies to everyone. And I think it's allowed so much for me. And I'm wondering, how do you describe that to someone who is running a company, leading others? Maybe they're a parent also. How do you describe that to someone so that it feels valuable and worth investing in?
So after many years of doing this work, I identified what I've come to call the number one barrier to executive effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? One barrier to executive effectiveness. And as you said, what you were saying, it was occurring to me that it could also be the number one barrier to parenting effectiveness, to relational effectiveness, but I'm going to hold it in the realm of executive, right?
Okay.
And the term that I came up with is egomyopia. Egomyopia. And egomyopia is basically not being able to see and regulate our ego, right? And our ego, and when you talk about the 24-year-old version, the 30-year-old version versus your current version, right? That notion of sort of the egomyopia means that my perception is wrapped around this tight, unit that is very centered and self-oriented. And there's an aspect of that that's really necessary, right? We have to be able to function. We have to be able to be autonomous. We have to learn how to have agency in our lives. Those are all wonderful, powerful, necessary gifts, right? But egomyopia is saying that, I have the need to be right. I must be right. And so what happens to a leader who needs to be right in the meeting? Everyone else has to be either wrong or quiet. And there's, I'm being right. Well, I have to be liked. That's a great one, right? And what happens to that? Now I'm so diplomatic as a leader because I want to be liked that I'm not actually saying what's on my mind. And, I'm perpetuating all kinds of dysfunction. Or I have to have might. I must be in control. I must be in charge. I must have autonomy and power and authority. These are sort of egomyopia type of expressions, right? And it isn't that being right, being liked, or having might is inherently bad. It's just that it's kind of immature. And so take to evolve, to your point, right? The difference between the 24-year-old and the mature sort of person who knows herself is that the egomyopia, the need to be right, the need to be liked, the need to have might, kind of evolves and grows. And what we can have on the other side of that, the need to be right, I must be smart, right? Matures into what comes online as wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? Now, when I'm bringing wisdom instead of the need to be right, I can start seeing people for who they are, seeing the situation for what it is, seeing the bigger picture, understanding the consequences of what's going to happen and what made this come to be. That's wisdom, right? The need to be liked, which is all about me, like me, see me, know me, matures to love, the ability to give to others, to see them for who they are, to honor and nurture their spirit, their soul, their body, their mind, their career, right? The love that is the inkling to give, to nurture. And the need to have might, which is I want to be in control, I mustn't be in charge here, turns into actual power, right? Living with purpose and relaxed presence, real personal power. And that power, when we come to it, is the only way that we can sustainably empower others. Because the people who's still stuck in the need to have might cannot share power because they must have the might. When I come into my personal power, I can cultivate that in others. And to the point that you're making about this sort of, the knowing yourself, right? When I can come into myself and come into this wisdom, into this love, into this power, that's when I can begin to also really bring that up in other people. The reason you're such a fabulous coach at this point, there are many reasons, but knowing yourself allows you to see others and help them know themselves.
Yeah.
You don't have to be there and have them affirm you because you already know yourself. And when you can bring that with a coach, when you can bring that as a leader, when you can bring that as a parent, get comfortable in your skin, inevitably, it is not possible to avoid this. When we get comfortable in our skin, we begin to automatically invite and encourage and educate and coach others to be comfortable in their skin. And the collective effort of that is remarkable in terms of creativity, in terms of engagement, in terms of passion, in terms of ease. And so, yes, I'm a big fan.
I'm a big fan now because I feel, as you were describing that, my whole body is like, yes, that's what's required. Yes. But you don't know that when you're not doing it or before you need to do it. Right. So there's this lack of awareness, I think, that happens. And I would love to know, I think just by being you bring awareness to it. But I know it's more than that. I know that when you have a conversation with someone, they don't even know that you're going to become their guide on that initial conversation. I know they don't. So how do you navigate those conversations so that someone could understand what's possible when they haven't even begun to do this work yet? And I know you do this, but I'm so curious about how you present it.
Yeah.
In the conversation.
I had a conversation with somebody on Monday, this president of a company. Quite frankly, to your point, it was just an introduction. So I didn't, right. Who knew? But I think the first thing that I would say, and I think you and I probably share that, and I care.
Yeah.
I genuinely, my long-standing sort of practices brought me to the point where humans are precious, and I care. I just care about, for me, it's a spiritual motivation, right? I really care about wanting to have folks wake up to their own remarkable nature and then to continue to do that for others, right? There's, one candle lights the next candle, lights the next candle. And when one candle lights the next candle, the first candle is not diminished for lighting the candle after it, right? And so on and so on and so on. And so, and then not unlike what you do, so, and, on display here so beautifully, right? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not entering into the conversation to tell you, I don't start a conversation by telling my life story. You said, tell me, where your origin story. In this venue, it makes civil sense, but I'm not entering into a conversation with a stranger going, let me take you back to when I was born,
Yeah.
I'm curious. And what happens is when you combine care with curiosity, we then enter into a conversation that goes below the level of your sort of day-to-day transaction or the sort of, cocktail party.
Mm-hmm.
Something opens up when we show up with care and with curiosity, right? And then, there's a little bit of, I'm going to go alliterate here, I guess, that I care, I'm curious. And then there's some courage to name things, right? Not to name it like, I see this in you, I, the great oracle. But when I heard this in what you said, is that what you meant? Because I sense that it's emerging and you haven't named it fully, but that's what I hear. And they go, holy shit, how'd you figure that out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say, the care is sort of the love. I wasn't intending to sort of put this together, but now that you're asking me, right? If I talk about wisdom, love, and power, right? Wisdom is one of the great markers of wisdom is curiosity, right? Wisdom isn't necessarily knowledge, right? Wisdom is the perception of things. And so this curiosity is the wisdom, right? The care that I'm referring to as the love, right? I really do care. And then the courage piece is part of the power. So this is very cool. I hadn't actually put that together before, but that's how we engage in a conversation. I bring care, I bring courage, and I bring curiosity, and we enter then into an experience that is not the ordinary, typical experience.
Yeah.
And once we begin there, just like this president the other day, said, what does it take to sort of work with you?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I'm like, well, what do you mean? Because I'm in the conversation.
Yes. Like, yeah. You said, wait. I wasn't even going there yet. I wasn't showing up with that.
We wouldn't be appalled because I have done this. I had, it wasn't that long ago, I was talking with this business owner, this wonderful woman. And then she goes, well, what does it take to work with you? There was another one of those questions. And I was like, wait, I'm not ready. I'm like, I'm in a whole different mindset. I can't answer that for you. Can we talk again tomorrow? And she's like, what? Like, I know this is the worst sales pitch ever, but I kind of, I get in the mode and the groove and I want to stay there. And so, that's sort of the pleasure of it, right? Because to have these, and then when it goes on, like if I'm coaching somebody over time, right? We can go places when, and I have so much experience, Suzanne, at this point. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm chairman of the board of this organization. I'm sort of was inducted as a thought leader at the Institute of Coaching. I've written 3 books. I mean, the knowledge is just so vast. Right. That's not where I'm coming from.
Right.
What's interesting to me is who are you and how does your journey get sort of realized and how does that affect the team and then the organization? Right. So that's a real pleasure.
Yeah. I think it's such a gift. And I want to just say to many times coaches ask me, well, how do you get clients? How do you have a sales conversation? And what Eric just shared, that's how. And it's so beautiful the way you described that for me, because I can't tell you how many times that's happened for me in a conversation where someone has said, well, how do I hire you? And I'm like, huh? What? I wasn't even there yet. And if you're serious, let's talk the same time next week. But I want to finish where we were today. And, this idea of serving others, you described that so well. The love, the care, the courage. And you're such a deep listener Do you think that's because you spent so much time in silence with yourself?
For sure. Yes. I mentioned to you earlier, at this point in my life, I think of my meditation practice as a practice of listening.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that I got into this field was that I wanted to have a professional practice that would allow me to maintain my spiritual practice as part of the professional practice, right? And so the beautiful thing about coaching, about facilitating, and I do keynotes and I write. I mean, so it's not all sort of the yin. There's a yang component to it as well, right? There's a masculine and the feminine, as it were, the yin and yang. But, from the perspective of being attuned to another person, I had spent almost 40 years paying attention. I mean, if there's anything I'm trained in really thoroughly, it's paying attention. That is literally what I've done for thousands of hours, is just sit and pay attention. And so paying attention to another human. And when I work with teams, right, noticing the dynamics in a room, right, I'm noticing it, long before anyone else has noticed it. And because I'm listening at multiple levels, from the very sort of initial about the download, right, I'm listening at the head level, like what's the information. I'm listening at the heart level, as in what's the connectivity and the sort of the sense of communal energy. I'm listening at the gut level. What wants to move here, right? And so as I'm listening at the three levels, I was with a client group that I'd worked with for a year, and I'm in San Diego, they're in San Francisco. So I went up there once a month and spent like a day with their executive team, right? It was kind of an intensive. And the COO had pulled me to the side when we were done one day, and he goes, "Eric, how do you do that?" I said, "How do I do what?" He goes, "How do you know exactly where we need to go every time we get together?" And I'm like, "Ira, I don't." He goes, "I don't believe you, because every time we get together, we get to this place that we need to get to. How do you do it?"
Mm-hmm.
I have an agenda, I have a process, all these mechanisms, and I have these systems and frameworks. At the end of the day, I am listening at a level that none of them is listening, and I can feel what wants to emerge, and I let it come in, and I invoke it, and I give it a name, and then suddenly it's in the room, and they're like, "Holy shit, this is exactly what I needed,"
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So I am, of all things in my life, I am trained to pay attention, and that is predicated on listening.
I love that, and I hear something deeper, the intuitive piece and the trust that is required in order to show up like that. So that trust comes from experience and, hundreds, thousands of hours of doing it. But having other people see that in you and trust it also, a team full of people trusting where you're going to take them, such an incredible gift.
I mean, you are so sharp. I freaking...
And you get paid for it too, which is really cool.
It is cool. But Suzanne, your distinctions, your inquiry, I'm really enjoying being in your presence. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, I know this conversation is sort of about me, and you're on display with all your genius and beauty and the depth and nuance. I mean, the things you're bringing forward is just so gorgeous. I love it. And you're absolutely right. I say this to executive teams that I work with all the time. I have no misgivings or I am fully aware of the privilege that they are bestowing to allow me to drop into the middle of their community and affected by my presence. It is never lost on me that this is a privilege and a responsibility. I take it very seriously, and you're right. I mean, it's a big deal, right? Because, I'm sitting in the room there, and I was recently up in, it was Vail, right? The global executive team had come together, right? So they did, it's some really nice hotel in Vail. And I'm sitting there with, here's the global CEO, the regional CEO, the chairman of the board of this, whatever it is, a multi-billion dollar organization, right? And they're basically handing the reins over to Eric. Help us.
Yeah.
And it's never lost on me that that's a big responsibility, and it's also a real delight.
Yes.
It's a real delight to help them articulate and behave in ways that they haven't articulated and behaved before, that is net value adding to their business.
Yes.
A net value adding to their humanity. And so, yeah, it is a trust. Forget trust fall from a chair, right? This is a it's a big trust walk.
Yes. And I think there was Dr. Danny Friedland wrote a book called Leading Well from Within. And I've read it twice now. And this idea of self-leadership so that you can help others lead, and being okay not being the leader also. That's a vulnerability piece that I'm intrigued by, because it's not all about me when I'm with a group of people or my own community. It's not. And a lot of times it feels like I'm the center of attention, but I'm not there for me. I'm there for the people in the room. And I think that is such a gift. I always say it's a gift to be learning things for other people. Just take AI tools for an example. I get to spend a couple hours every week diving into technology so that I can bring that knowledge to other people. Such a privilege in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple thoughts there. One is, to lead is to teach, right? I mean, the distinction between teaching and leading is a ludicrous one, right? To lead is to teach. The other thing that the person, as you were saying that, is, and you said that you had started out in the comments you just made, and then you said, I'm in a room. I think like you, right? I don't think there's a venue in which you're not the leader. But you have there's a continuum of what you do with that power, what you do with that role, what you do with that dynamic, right? And so, one way to describe that dynamic, that continuum is like taking space and holding space, right? So on the one end of the continuum, I can take space, and I can be intentional about taking space, right? If I want to guide, if I want to direct, if I want to insist, if I want to drive, I can take space. I can come on, and there's all the way over here is holding space, where I'm going to be much more of the container, right? That's inviting others to fill the space, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a maturity journey, because, Eric in his young life was really much more into taking space.
Yes. Yeah.
He didn't quite grasp this holding space, right? Eric at this point can hold space beautifully, right? And I can zoom in here and take space, zoom out here and hold space. But I'm never like you, not sort of the leader, because that's at a certain point, that sense of authority, that sense of groundedness, that sense of trust, right, is not a role. It's a vibrational identity. It's the way of being. And I think the journey of maturity, and so I work with CEOs in this all the time. The ego myopia is really focused on holding space. I mean, on taking space. And the conscious leaders can move back and forth between taking space, right? I'll be in charge now, what I'm saying, or holding space. What do you guys want? You go do it. And it's not that we're not the leader, it's just we have range. And this is one of the great sort of emphases in my coaching work and my facilitation work. I wrote this I think the second to last chapter in my book, Leadership Breakdown. I talk about forget change, build range.
Oh, that's good. That's really.
I don't coach people to change because everyone I'm coaching is mature, sophisticated, successful. What the hell do you want to change for? What? They're under resourcing their capacity, right? So there's not enough range in their responses and their thinking and their relating. And so my work is to help people grow range, right? Have more possibilities at hand from which they can make choices. And then inevitably it looks like they've changed, right? But it's situational, right? So that's, I don't know that when you get to this point where you're the leader, you're a leader.
Mhm.
But if you're a conscious leader, you have range.
Agreed. I feel that's so rich, the description of that. It's almost adaptability in my mind. It's a willingness to be what other people need.
But there's a version of being what other people need. It looks like people pleasing or being a chameleon or right.
Yeah.
I don't think you're referring to that. I think you're coming back to this point of service, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying, if I'm stuck in ego myopia, it's all about me. I have my need to be right, my need to be liked, my need to have might. It's hard to flex because I need what I need.
Right.
If I can move, mature, and grow into wisdom to see what's necessary and what's happening, love, the capacity to actually attend to what other people need in that space, and then power, the ability to move intentionally and purposefully in that space, then yes, I have range, right? I can be what people need. And this, there's sort of the classic sales line, right? Sometimes you need to sometimes you give people what they want so you can be there long enough to give them what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes what people need is not what they think they need.
Yes.
Right. And I think when we can tune in, not just to what they need, but we can tune in even deeper to what they require that they may not be able to articulate.
Yeah.
And then we can bring that forward. Now we look like we're prescient. Now we're looking like we're reading the future, which we're not. We're just paying attention. And my staff, the folks that work for me, the folks that work for leaders like this, they feel so supported even when they're being pushed.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful thing because now they're not grumpy. They're engaged. And we all know about the research on engagement, right?
Yes. Yes. One of my dearest friends said to me yesterday, she's been doing something in her business for about 2 years and it's not working. And she said to me, it's not working. And we're on the phone and I smiled to myself. And I took a nice deep breath and she said, what? And I said, I know it's not working. Do you want to do something different? And she said, yes. And inside, I was like, finally. But she had to get to that point. I can't push somebody to change or want to do something different. But it was such an incredible moment for me to feel her willingness now to see things differently. And since we're really good friends, she's not a client. We're really close friends. To have her see now, and when I experience that, and I'm sure this happens to you, when someone gets it, when someone just sees, doesn't matter if they're paying me or not, that feels like such an accomplishment, and not from an ego-based, oh, Sue is great, Eric's great, look what he did, but a supportive, engaged, just, I'm living my purpose right now. And I really feel as though I'm so thankful that you heard the message of bringing this message to your corporate experience, that blend that you have is so needed today. Not everybody is a conscious leader. Not everybody has a conscious community or culture within their company. And I think it's so needed right now, and such a gift that you've brought it together. And I'm honored that I help you tell more people about it because of that.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. Yeah, they, the arc of history had a particular bend right in the 1750s, right? It was called the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution had many implications, not the least of which is it birthed the era of the entrepreneur, right? The commercial leaders. We didn't have that before. We had tradesmen, right? There were kings, there were priests. They sort of ran the world, right? And then you had the commercial class that was, the kings and priests were always fighting about who could own the commercial class, right? Because the people with the money had the power, the people with the power had the money, right? The advent of the Industrial Revolution sort of democratized the distribution of means and money and middle class, upper class. Suddenly there were people of, wealth and power that were not from noble blood or from priestly, lineage. And so there was a revolution in human sort of culture that became this new class of people with money and power based on business, right? And fast forward, post World War II, where sort of the kind of post-industrial world really picks up speed, and where we land today is that in sort of the course of history, the kings and the priests are their equivalents, whatever, right? The governments and churches are not calling the shots; business people are.
Yeah.
Do we need any more evidence of that at this point? I've been talking about this for the last 5 years, and it's on display in a way that on display at a whole nother level, right? Business people are running the show. If we don't raise their consciousness, if they're just driven by the sort of ego myopic need to be right, have might, to just have power, the executives in organization these days are implicitly and explicitly now in charge of the architects of our freaking world, the physical world, the mimetic world, the cultural world, our relationship, where we think we want our tastes and fashions are orchestrated and architected. And so this notion of conscious leadership is not just about sort of solar panels and, recyclables. It's about really holding space, being a steward for humanity and for the planet. And so we have this like incredibly critical moment to raise consciousness among executives who are the architects of society and the planet, so that as they're architecting it, they are doing so from a place of awareness and consciousness of the implications near-term, long-term, and to all stakeholders. And so that's
all people and planet, right? Like it's, who are we being as a business owner, small or large? This applies to even the smallest business owner, because they are influencing other people. If you're selling a product or a service in the online space, you have a responsibility to the people that are buying from you, in my book.
And to the people that are manufacturing, and the people that are shipping, and the people that are billing for it, right? So yeah, that's part of I have my own personal, lifelong fascination and practice around combining consciousness and business. But there is a bigger game afoot than Eric's intentions, right? There is a reality which says that, we need to affect, business school doesn't do any effort to raise consciousness, right? You read a P&L, you do marketing, you do finance, you do strategy, all these wonderful things. But now we are talking about architects of humanity and architects of the planet. So let's invest and insert consciousness into these folks so that they're architecting from that place as well.
Well said. tell us a little bit about how we can get in touch with you. How can our listeners today get in touch with you, follow you, get on your email list and all that good stuff?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. The social network I'm on, the only one I'm on is LinkedIn. So,
Okay.
Eric Kaufmann, my name on LinkedIn. My mugshot's on there, so you should be able to identify me.
Yes.
I have a newsletter that I put out that goes sort of deep into principles and practices of how to do this. And my email is Eric, my first name, at Sagatica, Sagatica, Sagatica. And if you email me or just go to sagatica.com, there's a place to join the newsletter. But thank you for inviting me. And I said this once, but it's such a delight to be in conversation with you. Your own wisdom, love, and power are so on display. It's nourishing to me to have this conversation. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm a words of affirmation girl, so I really appreciate that and love that so much. So thank you for being here today. I appreciate you. And we'll talk again soon. I know.
I look forward to it.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another empowering episode of Unlock Your Way. I hope you found today's discussion inspiring and you're ready to take your business and personal growth to that next level. If you're feeling as fired up as I am and eager to unlock that full potential, I'm here to help you on your journey and provide that personalized guidance tailored to your unique goals and challenges. Simply book a one-on-one coaching call with me and we'll dive deep into your business aspirations and see how we could co-create a roadmap for your success. And whether you're striving to scale an enterprise or just getting started, I'm here to support you every step of the way. To schedule your coaching call, simply visit the website at unlockyourwaywithstk.com, click on the Book a Call button, and we'll turn your dreams into that reality. Subscribe and review on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. Plus, you can join over 800 entrepreneurs in the Idea Lab Facebook group. Let's make success as an entrepreneur happen together. Until next time, I'm STK. Keep dreaming big, stay focused, and most of all, have fun while you're doing it.
This show is powered by Media Leads. To get your next great podcast produced, go to MediaLeadsCo.com.